Today's story is about a man who was sentenced to death and then executed 23 years later. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, well, yeah, that happens all the time, especially here in America. But what if I were to tell you that there was DNA evidence to suggest that he was completely innocent and the state killed him anyway? But before we get into the story, I want to thank you for stopping by my channel. And if you enjoy stories about the dark side of humanity, then please subscribe and stick around for more just like this one. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and hop right into it. Marcellus Williams was born on December 30th of 1968 in South Bend, Indiana. And at the age of 5, he and his family packed up and moved to St. Louis, Missouri. Now, Marcellus's childhood was far from perfect or even decent. Drugs and crime played a huge factor in his family dynamics, and because of that, Marcellus was introduced to alcohol, drugs, and weapons at a very young age. He was also extremely violently abused, both physically and sexually, by multiple members of his family, and eventually, at a young age, he was just straight up abandoned by his parents. Marcellus did, however, have somebody in his life that he could look up to, and that was his brother, who was like a father figure to him. And thanks to his brother, Marcellus pretty much stayed on the straight and narrow. At least from what we can see, there wasn't anything super serious or bad that he got into. At some point, Marcellus met a woman who was a single mother, and the two of them fell in love and got married. He became a stepfather, and then soon after that, a biological father when they would have his son. Now, from what I can tell, the two of them didn't stay together, but life seemed to be going really good for Marcellus. At least it was, until in 1997, tragedy would strike when his older brother would pass away, and this took a major toll on Marcellus. After the passing of his brother, Marcellus began spiraling, and eventually he began committing more serious crimes. In 1997, he robbed a house, and then in 1999, he was convicted of robbing a donut shop and sentenced to prison for 20 years. Now, as he sat there in prison, he thought to himself that life really can't get much worse than this. He believed he hit rock bottom. At least that is what he was thinking, until detectives came to interview him about a woman that was murdered named Felicia Gayle. Felicia Gayle was born on February 6, 1956 in Rockford, Illinois. She had a pretty normal childhood, and as she was growing up, she developed a passion for writing. Eventually, she graduated from the University of Illinois with a degree in journalism, and she soon moved to St. Louis, Missouri to start her career with the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. While living in St. Louis, Felicia would begin dating a man named Daniel Pikus. He was a doctor for the Barnes Jewish Hospital in St. Louis, and the two of them fell for each other pretty quickly. They would get married in 1979, and they would live happily together up until 1998, when sadly, Felicia was taken from not only Daniel, but from everybody who ever adored her. On the afternoon of August 11th, 1998, Felicia decided she wanted to take an afternoon shower. So she hopped in the shower, did the showery things, and then she got out, dried off, and headed downstairs. But when Felicia got to the bottom of the stairs, she was violently attacked by an unknown intruder. Felicia tried to fight back, but it was of no use, and her life was stolen from her. The intruder stabbed Felicia 43 times all over her body, and they left the knife plunged into her neck. They then went throughout the house and they stole her purse, her husband's laptop, and a jacket before fleeing the scene. Felicia's body wouldn't be discovered until later that night when Daniel got home. He immediately called police, and when the police arrived, they realized that this was not going to be an open and shut case. The attack itself happened in the middle of the day, in a gated community, and nobody saw anything. No one saw coming or going out of Felicia's house. Now, the police did find evidence. They found a bloody footprint, unknown hairs on Felicia's body, fingerprints, and of course the murder weapon and other forensic evidence. But even with that, they wouldn't find a suspect. In fact, they wouldn't get any kind of lead or name until the following year. In May of 1999, Felicia's family offered a $10,000 reward to any lead that led to the arrest of Felicia's murderer. And from this, two individuals came forward named Henry Cole and Laura Asaro, and they both named Marcellus Williams as Felicia's murderer. Henry Cole told police that when he was recently in jail, he was actually locked up with Marcellus. He claimed Marcellus did a jailhouse confession with him and told him everything about the murder, just admitted to all of it. The issue with that statement was that he wasn't giving police any kind of new information that they didn't know or that the public didn't know. He actually sounded like every other news station or newspaper in the area that had all this information. He was just giving out public information, which didn't help them in their case. But the police, they didn't have anything, so they rolled with it. And eventually, Henry directed them to Laura Asaro and claimed that she had more information about the murder. Laura Asaro was Marcellus's girlfriend back in 1998, and she claimed that not only did he tell her in detail about this murder, but that she also found scratches on his neck and blood on his shirt one night. She also stated that going through his car one day, she found a laptop and a purse that had Gayle's ID. Police would also say that Laura gave them information that nobody outside of the investigation knew about the murder. But to this day, that's yet to be confirmed. It needs to be noted that both Henry and Laura both had their own lengthy criminal records, but they were also known to be super huge liars. Their stories contradicted each other, and they never stayed the same. And Laura actually was facing her own solicitation charges when she decided to conveniently volunteer this information. As for Henry, he refused to testify unless he was paid. So all in all, these two witnesses were not the best. They really probably shouldn't have been used. But the police, they had nothing else, and they decided to run with it and not look further into what they were saying. When detectives finally interviewed Marcellus, he swore up and down that he had nothing to do with Felicia's murder and that Henry and Laura were lying. He also admitted that he knows that he is not the perfect law-abiding citizen, but what he's not is a murderer. And he maintained that innocence even after being charged and facing the death penalty. During the trial, forensic evidence was showed to the jury, but not in favor of the prosecution. Instead, the evidence, as well as DNA evidence, could not be linked to Marcellus. It was as if he was never at the house. So instead, the prosecution leaned heavy into the testimonies of Henry Cole and Laura Asaro. And they also claimed that after searching Marcellus's car, they found a ruler and a calculator that belonged to Felicia, which is really weird. Wouldn't they have found that back when he robbed the donut shop and they searched the car and searched him? Why are they just now finding it years later? That part just doesn't make sense to me at all. The next thing they said they found was the stolen laptop. They said that they found the man that had Felicia's laptop, and it was in fact Felicia's husband Daniel's laptop, and that the man claimed that Marcellus is the one that sold him to him. Now, why this wasn't told to the jury, I don't know, but the information that was left out of this was the fact that Laura gave Marcellus that laptop to go and sell. Why that was never brought up until later on, way in the 2010s, before his execution, I have no idea. Marcellus and his team were confident that since the DNA and forensic evidence showed that he wasn't at the house, that the jury would find him innocent. But in 2001, the jury did not find him innocent. They instead convicted him of capital murder, and Marcellus Williams was sentenced to death. Marcellus's execution was set for sometime in 2015, but a slimmer of hope would shine through when a stay of execution was granted due to new DNA being found on the murder weapon. And that new DNA actually belonged to a member of the prosecution team from 2001. It turns out that while the prosecution was heading into trial back in 2001, they completely dropped the ball and mishandled all the evidence. So now, members of their team had DNA all over this murder weapon and other pieces of evidence. But even after seeing this blatant mishandling of evidence, it really didn't seem to matter to the courts, because soon after, a new execution date was set for Marcellus. The new execution date was set for August 22nd of 2017, but Marcellus and his team were not giving up. They were still fighting to prove his innocence. They were talking about the fact that all the evidence was mishandled and how the DNA and forensic evidence, even to this day, could not link Marcellus to the crime. And they even brought up that there was new DNA that was found on the knife that still needed to be tested. But the state Supreme Court, they didn't care. They would not grant a stay of execution, and they would not re-examine the DNA. And the prosecutor, he pretty much just said that since DNA wasn't even took a part in getting this conviction, then any new DNA found or not found really didn't matter. On the day of Marcellus's execution, Governor Eric Greeton stepped in and issued a last-minute stay of execution. He then initiated a board of inquiry that consisted of 5 former federal judges, and that was headed by Carol E. Jackson, who was also a former federal judge. And they were tasked with going over this case and looking at the DNA and all other aspects of this case and figuring out exactly if there was enough evidence that would prove that Williams was innocent, or if there was none and it was the same outcome of him being guilty. This panel of judges combed over everything. They looked at the DNA and forensic evidence, they subpoenaed the prosecution and the defense from the case, they were doing it all. And get this, remember Laura, Marcellus's ex-girlfriend? Well, she was now going around telling everybody, trying to tell everybody that what she said back then was a lie. But in 2019, she passed away, and what she said was basically just pushed to the side. They never even took it into consideration or even tried to take it into consideration. So, unfortunately, nothing ever came of that. This inquiry continued for years, but in 2023, the now new governor of Missouri, Mike Parson, dissolved the panel. And he stated that it was now time for the courts to go and make a decision on this case. And get this, he never received their report. All those years of work and investigation just gone to waste. And then after that, he lifted the stay of execution. And almost immediately, the state attorney general, Andrew Bailey, asked the state Supreme Court to go ahead and set a new execution date. Marcellus and the people behind him were not giving up, though, and they were going to continue to fight until the very end to prove Marcellus was innocent. His attorney continued to appeal, stating that there was new DNA evidence that could prove Marcellus innocent. The Midwest Innocence Project also filed a lawsuit against the state of Missouri in August of 2023, saying that the prosecuting attorney was on record stating that he had convincing evidence that would prove Marcellus Williams innocent. They also alleged that the Missouri Attorney General's office had a record of dismissing DNA evidence that could prove a convicted person innocent. On January 27, 2024, St. Louis prosecuting attorney Wesley Bell filed a motion to vacate Williams' death sentence. He cited ineffective assistance of counsel, apparent bias in jury selection, and weakness of police investigation. He asked the court for a hearing to consider new evidence as well as go over other aspects of the investigation. The new evidence consisted of 3 independent DNA experts who all concluded that the male DNA found on the weapon did not belong to Marcellus Williams, but instead belonged to an investigator and a member of the prosecution team that mishandled the weapon before the trial. Now, a hearing was scheduled for later that year to determine Williams' innocence, but before that could happen, the courts decided that, again, since DNA was not part of getting this conviction, that any new DNA found or not found really didn't matter, and they denied the motion to vacate. On June 24th, 2024, Williams received a new execution date of September 24th of that year. But on July 2nd, the Circuit Court of St. Louis County, Missouri, surprisingly scheduled a hearing that was set for August 21st of that year to evaluate the evidence of his supposed innocence. But on July 12th, 2024, the Missouri Supreme Court threw that off of the table, and they ruled that the execution would move forward despite the evidence and the pending lawsuit to overturn his conviction. On August 21st, 2024, Marcellus Williams accepted an offered plea deal in a last-ditch effort to save his life. This deal would have commuted his death sentence to life in prison without the possibility of parole. This plan, however, did not work for Marcellus and his team. The State Attorney General, Andrew Bailey, completely opposed the deal, and then the Missouri Supreme Court blocked the plea deal on the same day. The execution date remained the same, and a hearing was scheduled to discuss Williams' alleged innocence. On September 12, 2024, St. Louis County Circuit Judge Bruce Hilton rejected Williams' appeal. He stated that counsel was using the same argument that they had used multiple times in the past and that had been rejected multiple times in the past. He then ordered that the execution move forward as scheduled. On September 24th of 2024, Governor Parson denied Williams' clemency, and then the case was reviewed by the United States Supreme Court. The United States Supreme Court denied the request to halt the execution even though 3 separate justices said that they would have granted the request. Despite the evidence in the lawsuit and everyone fighting to try to save him, the execution did move forward. And at 6 p.m. on September 24th of 2024, Marcellus Williams was executed by lethal injection. Governor Mike Parson justified this execution by talking about Williams' previous criminal record, as well as his alleged behavior in prison, which included threatening staff as well as attacking other inmates. It also needs to be noted that the Midwest Innocent Project and the prosecution office were not the only people fighting for Marcellus's life. Thousands upon thousands of people across the entire nation believed that Marcellus was innocent, and they wanted his execution to be stopped, including Felicia Gayle's family, who didn't even attend the execution because they wanted no part of it. And that's it for that one, you guys. I would really love to hear y'all's opinion on this one. So if you made it to the end, please go ahead, hop in the comments, let me know your thoughts about this story. And while you're at it, like the video, and if you're not subscribed, please subscribe and stick around for more stories just like this one. Now, y'all get out of here, enjoy your weekend, and I will see you next week for another story from the dark side of humanity.